Fleet Admiral Tony Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Earth's Fury, watching the final Drakthar stronghold burn in the darkness of space. 3 months had passed since the attack on New Montana, and in that time, human forces had systematically dismantled the entire Drakthar slave network. It hadn't been a war in any traditional sense. Wars implied that both sides had a chance of winning. What had happened in the Outer Rim was closer to pest control, conducted with ruthless efficiency by forces the galaxy had never imagined humans possessed. "Admiral," called Captain Jennifer Walsh from the communication station, "we're receiving surrender terms from the remaining Drakthar leadership. They're offering to negotiate through council mediators." Tony studied the tactical display showing the burning remains of the Drakthar capital ships. Around the destroyed vessels, human rescue ships were pulling survivors from the wreckage, following the strict rules of engagement that had governed every human operation in this campaign. "What's our response to their offer?" Walsh asked. Tony's expression was cold. "We don't negotiate with slavers. We eliminate them." The destruction of the Drakthar hegemony had taken exactly 96 days. Human forces had moved through their territory like a precision instrument, targeting only military installations and slave-related facilities, while carefully protecting civilian populations. It was a level of tactical sophistication that no galactic power had thought possible from such a young species. But the real shock wasn't the military victory. It was what humans did with their success. Commander Beth Collins walked through the corridors of Liberation Station, a massive facility that had been built in just 6 weeks to process the hundreds of thousands of freed slaves recovered from Drakthar territory. The station buzzed with activity as medical teams, translators, and administrators worked around the clock to reunite families and arrange transportation home for people from dozens of different worlds. "Commander," called Dr. Lisa Park from the medical section, "we've got another group of long-term prisoners ready for transport. These are Zephyrians who were captured over 20 years ago." Collins nodded, checking her tablet for the latest transport schedules. "The Zephyrian government is sending ships to pick them up tomorrow." "What about the unidentified species in Section 7? "We're still working on translation protocols for their language, but we've managed to determine their home system coordinates. Captain Morrison is preparing a diplomatic mission to contact their government." Collins marveled at the scope of the operation. Human forces hadn't just defeated the Drakthar. They had liberated every slave facility in hegemony space, freeing people who had been written off as lost causes by the galactic community for decades. Amy Patterson stood in the observation deck of the transport ship, carrying her family back to New Montana. The planet looked different now, with new defensive installations in orbit and construction crews rebuilding the settlements destroyed during the raid. But the biggest change wasn't visible from space. New Montana was no longer an isolated human colony, hoping for protection from the galactic community. It was now part of something larger and more powerful than anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. "Amy," called her father from across the observation deck, "come look at this." Amy joined her parents at the main viewing port, where they could see ships from a dozen different species approaching New Montana. These weren't military vessels or trade ships. They were delegations from worlds throughout the region, coming to meet with human administrators about joining something called the Human Commonwealth. "Representatives from the Centauri Republic arrived this morning," her father said, reading from a news tablet. "They're the 5th system to formally request Commonwealth membership this week." Amy watched as an elegant ship bearing Trilaxian markings docked with the orbital station. "Why do they want to join us?" Her mother smiled sadly. "Because we did something the galactic community said was impossible. We went into Drakthar space and brought their people home. Species that had given up hope of ever seeing their families again are learning that humans don't abandon anyone." The final scene of the Drakthar campaign played out not in space, but in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. Elena Rodriguez walked across the polished floor, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber as she approached her small desk in the back corner. But today, the chamber felt different. The delegates who had dismissed human concerns 3 months ago now watched Elena with something approaching nervousness. News of the Drakthar defeat had spread throughout council space, along with reports of human military capabilities that had shocked even the elder races. Elder Counselor Vexthal called the session to order, his crystal body reflecting light in patterns that seemed less confident than before. The Council recognizes Ambassador Rodriguez, who has requested this session to discuss recent events in the Outer Rim. Elena stood and faced the assembled delegates. Honored Council members, I'm here to provide a brief update on the situation with the Drakthar hegemony. She activated a holographic display showing a star chart of the region. As of yesterday, Drakthar military forces have been completely eliminated. Their slave networks have been dismantled, their processing facilities destroyed, and their leadership either captured or killed. The hall was completely silent. Elena continued with the same calm tone she might use to discuss trade agreements. Human forces recovered approximately 400,000 individuals from various species who had been enslaved by the hegemony over the past several decades. These people are being returned to their home worlds with full medical care and trauma counseling. The Zephyrian delegate spread her wings slightly. Ambassador Rodriguez, what are human intentions regarding the former Drakthar territory? We have no territorial ambitions in that region, Elena replied. However, several dozen systems have requested to join the human commonwealth for mutual protection and economic cooperation. Elder Vexthal's crystal form darkened slightly. This commonwealth was not approved by the council. Under what authority do humans establish new political entities? Elena looked directly at the towering crystal being. Under the same authority that allowed the council to ignore the plight of enslaved populations for decades. We've learned that in this galaxy, authority comes from the ability to protect those who cannot protect themselves. You speak of protection, said the Trilaxian delegate, but human military actions violated numerous galactic laws regarding territorial sovereignty and use of force. Elena's expression didn't change. Which laws specifically? The Trilaxian consulted his tablet nervously. Military operations conducted without council approval, territorial incursions, destruction of civilian infrastructure. I see, Elena said calmly. And what is the council's position on the enslavement of sentient beings? Well, obviously slavery is abhorrent, but not abhorrent enough to actually do anything about it, Elena finished. I understand. Elder Vexthal attempted to regain control of the conversation. Ambassador Rodriguez, the council wishes to know human intentions regarding future military operations. Will humanity respect established territorial boundaries? Elena paused for a moment as if considering her answer carefully. That depends. Depends on what? On whether anyone else decides to attack human civilians or enslave innocent people anywhere in this galaxy. Elena's voice remained calm, but something in her tone made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. The Aquarian representative spoke through his translator. Are you threatening military action against council members?
Not at all, Elena replied.
I'm simply informing the council that humanity will respond appropriately to any future threats against our people or our allies. Your allies? Asked Vexthal. Elena gestured to the star chart behind her. 17 systems have joined the human commonwealth in the past month. All of them are species that the council considered too weak or unimportant to protect. We've learned that there are many peoples in this galaxy who share our values about protecting families and defending the innocent. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as delegates realized the implications of Elena's words. The humans weren't just building a military force. They were building a rival power block based on principles the council had abandoned long ago. Elder Vexithal raised one crystal appendage for silence. Ambassador Rodriguez, what does humanity want from this council? Elena smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Nothing, Elder Counselor. We've learned that we don't need your approval, your protection, or your permission. But I wanted to thank you for teaching us that valuable lesson. Thank us? 3 months ago, when you refused to help rescue 40,000 human slaves, you taught us that we could only depend on ourselves. That lesson has made us stronger than we ever imagined possible. Elena gathered her papers and prepared to leave. The human commonwealth will continue to respect the territorial boundaries of any peaceful species. We have no interest in conquest or domination, but we will also continue to protect anyone who asks for our help, regardless of whether the council approves. As she walked toward the exit, Elder Vexthal called out behind her. Where are you going, Ambassador? This session is not concluded. Elena turned back one final time. I'm going home, Elder Counselor. President Marcus Kane stood before the joint session of the Terran Assembly. looking out at the faces of representatives from every human world. The great chamber on Earth buzzed with tension as news of the Council's refusal spread through human space like wildfire. Kane had been president for 8 years, leading humanity through a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity. His administration had focused on diplomatic solutions and peaceful expansion, working within the galactic framework established by the elder races. But today everything had changed. For 300 years, Kane began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Humanity has tried to be model galactic citizens. We've followed their rules, respected their boundaries, and sought peaceful solutions to every conflict that arose. The assembly listened in complete silence. Representatives who normally argued loudly about trade policies and colonial budgets sat motionless, waiting for their leader to explain how humanity would respond to the greatest crisis in its galactic history. We believed that by proving ourselves worthy, we would earn respect and protection from the galactic community. We thought that peaceful cooperation would guarantee our safety among the stars. Kane paused, letting his words sink in. We were wrong. Kane activated the holographic display behind him, showing images from New Montana before the attack. Happy families working in fields, children playing in the streets, the harvest festival decorations that still hung in the abandoned settlement. 40,000 human beings were taken from New Montana 3 days ago. Fathers, mothers, children, grandparents. They were captured by slavers and carried away to suffer fates worse than death. When we asked the Galactic Council for help, we were told that human lives are not worth the inconvenience of military action. Angry murmurs rippled through the assembly. Kane raised his hand for silence and continued. The Council's message was clear. Humans are expendable. Our children can be stolen. Our families destroyed, our worlds attacked, and the galaxy will do nothing to help us. We have learned that in the eyes of the elder races, we are not citizens deserving protection. We are livestock, tolerated as long as we cause no trouble. Kane's voice grew harder, but the Council has forgotten something important about humanity. We are not livestock. We are not helpless. And we never abandon our own. Admiral Patricia Cruz stepped forward from her position at the side of the chamber. She was a small woman with silver hair and scars on her hands from years of ship maintenance, but her presence commanded instant respect from everyone in the room. Madam President, Kane said formally, please brief the Assembly on the current status of human naval forces. Admiral Cruz activated her own display, showing star charts that few people in the chamber had ever seen before. For the past 15 years, human shipyards throughout our space have been quietly building vessels based on recovered alien technology, improved by human engineering principles. The display showed sleek warships that looked nothing like the exploration vessels most humans were familiar with. These ships were clearly designed for one purpose: combat. The Council believes that humanity possesses approximately 200 ships suitable for basic defensive operations, Cruz continued. They are incorrect. The human defense fleet currently operates over 800 advanced warships, including 75 heavy cruisers and 12 battleships. Shocked gasps echoed through the assembly. Even most government officials had no idea that humanity possessed such a fleet. How did we build this fleet without the Council's knowledge? Asked Representative Collins from the Mars colony. Simple, Cruz replied. We built them in systems the Council considers unimportant. We used automated construction facilities that require minimal human oversight, and we designed them to look like civilian vessels until activated. Kane stepped forward again. The ships are there because some of us remembered the most important lesson from human history. Peace is only possible when you have the strength to defend it. Captain Steve Palmer stood at the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching his fleet move through hyperspace toward their first target. Palmer commanded the Third Strike Group, 12 heavy cruisers and 30 destroyers that officially didn't exist according to galactic records. His ships had spent the past week gathering intelligence on Drakthar operations in the Outer Rim. What they found was a sprawling network of slave processing facilities, prison camps, and auction houses that had been operating for decades without interference from the galactic community. Captain, called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the tactical station, we're approaching the Kepler station system. Enemy forces detected as expected. Palmer studied the tactical display showing the Drakthar facility ahead. Kepler Station was a massive complex built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, serving as a central processing point for slaves captured throughout the region. Intelligence suggested that survivors from New Montana were being held there. How many ships are defending the station? Palmer asked. 15 Drakthar warships, sir. Standard configuration battle group. Palmer nodded. Signal the fleet. We go in fast and hard. Remember, our priority is rescuing prisoners, not destroying everything in sight. The Drakthar had become accustomed to easy victories against species that lacked effective military forces. They had raided smaller civilizations for centuries, confident that the galactic community would never interfere with their operations. Their defensive tactics reflected this arrogance. Palmer's fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, appearing less than 1,000,000 kilometers from Kepler Station. The Drakthar ships immediately moved to intercept, following standard defensive patterns that had worked against every previous enemy they had faced. Enemy vessels closing on attack vector, reported the tactical officer. They're attempting to establish a defensive perimeter around the station. All ships engage, Palmer ordered. Target their engines and weapon systems. We want prisoners, not body counts. The battle lasted 18 minutes. Human ships moved with a precision and coordination that the Drakthar had never encountered before. Quantum torpedoes struck with surgical accuracy, disabling enemy vessels without destroying them completely. Adaptive shields deflected Drakthar energy weapons, while human targeting systems tracked multiple enemies simultaneously. Most importantly, human tactical doctrine emphasized speed and overwhelming force concentration. Instead of the prolonged engagements that characterized most galactic warfare, human forces struck decisively and moved on before their enemies could adapt. Station defenses are down, reported the tactical officer. All enemy ships disabled or destroyed. Palmer opened a communication channel to the station. Kepler Station, this is Captain Palmer of the Human Defense Fleet. You are ordered to surrender immediately and release all prisoners. You have 5 minutes to comply. The response came back in heavily accented galactic standard. Human ship, you dare not attack this facility. The Drakthar hegemony will destroy your entire species for this aggression. Palmer looked at his chronometer. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. What the Drakthar discovered over the next few hours was that human military efficiency extended beyond simple combat operations. Marine teams led by Commander Beth Collins moved through the station with methodical precision, locating and freeing prisoners while gathering intelligence on other Drakthar facilities. The humans didn't just rescue their own people. They freed every slave in the facility regardless of species. Zephyrians who had been captured decades ago, Trilaxian civilians taken during border raids, even members of species that Palmer had never heard of. Amy Patterson was among the rescued prisoners from New Montana. She had been separated from her parents during processing, but Collins' team reunited them in the station's central holding area. As they boarded human transport ships, Amy looked back at the Drakthar facility that had been her prison for a week. What happens now? She asked Collins. Now we find the rest of your people, the commander replied, and we make sure this never happens again. Palmer stood on his bridge, watching as the last transport ship cleared the station. Behind them, Kepler Station burned, its facilities destroyed and its records downloaded to human intelligence databases. Captain, called the communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Cruz, Priority Alpha. Palmer opened the channel. This is Palmer. Steve, good work on Kepler Station. How many prisoners did you recover? Over 3,000, ma'am. Various species, including 800 humans from New Montana and other colonies. Excellent. New orders are coming through now. We've located 6 more Drakthar facilities in this sector. The gloves are coming off. Palmer studied the new tactical data as it appeared on his screens. The scope of the Drakthar slave operation was even larger than they had initially believed, with processing facilities throughout the Outer Rim and trade networks extending deep into non-council space. Admiral, what about diplomatic consequences? The Council won't approve of military action outside their territory. Admiral Cruz's voice carried a cold edge that Palmer had never heard before. The Council made their position clear. They don't care about human lives, and they don't consider this their problem, so we're going to solve it ourselves. Palmer smiled grimly. Understood, ma'am. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 3 days after the New Montana raid. Elena Rodriguez stood at her small desk in the back corner, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared to address the greatest powers in the galaxy. She had not slept since receiving the news. and her voice was hoarse from arguing with Earth's government about how to respond. The great hall buzzed with conversation as delegates discussed the morning's agenda. Most of them seemed unconcerned about the human crisis, treating it as a minor administrative matter rather than the catastrophe it truly was. Elder Counselor Vexthal called the session to order, his crystal body reflecting the dome lights in sharp patterns. The council recognizes Ambassador Rodriguez of Earth, who has requested emergency consideration for recent events in human space. Elena stepped forward, feeling the weight of 40,000 missing lives on her shoulders. Honored delegates, 3 days ago, the agricultural world of New Montana was attacked by forces of the Drakthar hegemony. Over 40,000 human civilians were captured and taken as slaves. I am here to formally request immediate military intervention to rescue these people. The hall fell silent for a moment, then erupted in low murmurs of conversation. Elena could hear fragments of discussion in various alien languages, but the tone was clear. This was not the response she had hoped for. Elder Vexthal raised one crystalline appendage for silence. The council expresses its deep concern for the unfortunate events on New Montana. However, the Drakthar hegemony operates outside council jurisdiction. Any military action against them would require unanimous approval from all member species. How long does that process take? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Such decisions require careful consideration of all diplomatic, military, and economic factors, replied the Trilaxian delegate. The standard procedure involves committee review, impact assessment, and full debate. Typically 18 to 24 months. Elena felt her heart sink. 2 years? These people will be dead or worse by then. The Zephyrian delegate spread her wings slightly. A gesture that Elena had learned indicated mild irritation. Ambassador Rodriguez, while we sympathize with your emotional response, the Council cannot make hasty decisions that might destabilize the entire region. Military action against the Drakthar could provoke them to attack other worlds. They already attacked other worlds, Elena said, her voice rising. 7 human colonies have been hit in the past month. The Drakthar are conducting a systematic harvesting operation against human space. Perhaps, suggested the Aquarian delegate through his water-filled translator. This unfortunate situation could have been avoided if humans had been more cautious about expanding into dangerous regions. Elena stared at the alien in disbelief. Are you suggesting this is our fault? Not fault precisely, said the Korthani elder, his crystal form chiming softly. But humans have been particularly aggressive in their expansion efforts. Your species establishes colonies in regions that more experienced races avoid for good reasons. The New Montana system was surveyed and approved by this council, Elena protested. We followed every rule, every protocol. Rules and protocols cannot eliminate all risks, Elder Vexthal replied. Perhaps this incident will serve as a learning experience for your species. The galaxy is dangerous for those who venture beyond their capabilities. Elena felt anger building in her chest, hot and bitter. So that's it? 40,000 humans are condemned to slavery because we dared to build farms on a world you approved for colonization? The council deeply regrets the loss of life, said Vexthal, his tone suggesting the conversation was over. However, we must consider the greater good of all member species. Military action against the Drakthar would risk escalating the conflict and endangering billions of other lives. What if it were Korthani citizens? Elena demanded. Would you wait 2 years for committee approval if crystal beings were being harvested for slavery? The hall fell completely silent. Several delegates exchanged glances, and Elena could feel the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Elder Vexathal's crystal body darkened slightly, and when he spoke, his voice carried an edge of warning. The Korthani Empire has defended itself successfully for over 8,000 years. We do not require protection from the Council, because we have the strength to protect ourselves. Perhaps humans should focus on developing similar capabilities rather than expecting others to solve their problems. The Trilaxian delegate added his own thoughts. The Council has always made it clear that membership does not guarantee military protection. Each species is responsible for its own defense within the framework of galactic law. Elena looked around the great hall, seeing the same expression on every alien face. Polite indifference mixed with barely concealed condescension. These beings genuinely believed that human lives were less valuable than galactic stability. I see, Elena said quietly. So when humans are attacked, it's a learning experience. When humans ask for help, we're being unreasonable. When humans try to defend ourselves, we're being aggressive. You are twisting our words, protested the Zephyrian delegate. Am I? Elena asked. Let me be absolutely clear about what I'm hearing. This council will not act to save 40,000 human beings because it might inconvenience your trade relationships with other species. Is that an accurate summary? Elder Vexthal's crystal form rang like a warning bell. Ambassador Rodriguez, you are allowing emotion to cloud your judgment. The council operates on principles of logic and long-term thinking. Your species' tendency toward emotional responses is precisely why humans are not ready for true galactic leadership. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. What did you just say? I said that human emotional instability makes your species unsuitable for positions of real authority in galactic affairs. This crisis demonstrates exactly why humans must accept guidance from more mature civilizations. Elena stared at the towering crystal being for a long moment. Around the hall, other delegates nodded in agreement with the elder's assessment. After 3 centuries of peaceful cooperation, humanity's true status in this council was finally being made clear. I understand, Elena said, her voice now completely calm. Thank you for clarifying humanity's position in this organization. She gathered her papers and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Behind her, she could hear the delegates already moving on to the next item on their agenda, dismissing the human crisis as if it had never happened. As Elena reached the door, Elder Vexthal called out behind her. Ambassador Rodriguez, where are you going? The session has not ended. Elena turned back to face the council one final time. I'm going to call Earth and inform my government that we're withdrawing our request for council assistance. Clearly, we need to handle this matter ourselves. Handle it how? Asked the Zephyrian delegate. Your fleet is too small to challenge the Drakthar. Elena's expression was unreadable. I guess we'll find out. She left the chamber without another word, walking through corridors that suddenly seemed smaller and less impressive than they had that morning. As she made her way to the human embassy's communication center, Elena's mind was already working on the message she would send to Earth. The council had made their position clear. Human lives didn't matter enough to risk conflict with slavers. The 40,000 people from New Montana would be abandoned to their fate, along with anyone else the Drakthar decided to take. But the council had also made another thing clear. After 3 centuries of playing by their rules, humanity was still considered a minor species whose concerns could be dismissed without consequences. Elena began composing her message to President Kane, choosing her words carefully. The human government needed to understand exactly what had happened in this chamber today, and more importantly, what it meant for humanity's future relationship with the galactic community. As she worked, Elena remembered something her grandfather had told her years ago. He had been a military historian, specializing in human conflict patterns throughout history. The thing about humans, he had said, is that we can be peaceful for centuries at a time. But when someone crosses the line and threatens our families, we remember what we really are. Elena had never fully understood what he meant until today. As she finished her message and prepared to send it to Earth, she found herself wondering if the Galactic Council had any idea what they had just done. The message she sent was brief and direct. Council refuses assistance. Human lives deemed unworthy of military intervention. 40,000 still missing. Recommend we handle this ourselves. The response from Earth came back within hours, and it contained only 3 words that would change the galaxy forever. Understood. Stand by. The morning sky over New Montana blazed with orange and purple as the twin suns rose above the grain fields. Amy Patterson walked between the tall stalks of modified wheat, checking the irrigation sensors as she had done every morning for the past 3 years. At 19, she was one of the youngest agricultural technicians on the colony, but her skill with the automated systems had earned her respect among the older farmers. Today was special. The Harvest Festival would begin at noon, celebrating another successful growing season. Families from across the continent would gather in the main settlement to share food, music, and stories. Amy's parents had been preparing for weeks, and her mother's famous apple pies were already cooling on the kitchen windowsill. Amy finished her morning rounds and headed back toward the farmhouse where she had grown up. The building sat on a small hill overlooking the valley, surrounded by fruit trees that her father had planted when the family first arrived on New Montana 15 years ago. Everything looked peaceful and normal. She couldn't see the ships hiding behind the planet's smaller moon. In orbit, Colonel Lisa Brooks sat in the command center of New Montana's defense station, monitoring the early morning traffic reports. A few cargo shuttles were moving between the surface and the orbital trading post, and 2 passenger ships were scheduled to arrive later in the day for the festival. Everything appeared routine. Lisa had commanded the defense station for 2 years, and most days were quiet. New Montana was far from any major shipping routes, and the colony had never experienced any serious threats. The station's weapons were powerful enough to handle pirates or smugglers, and the early warning sensors could detect approaching ships from several light hours away. What Lisa didn't know was that the ships now moving toward New Montana had technology specifically designed to avoid those sensors. The attack began at exactly 11:30 in the morning, just as families were gathering for the festival. Amy was helping her mother carry pies to the community center when the sky suddenly filled with massive shapes dropping out of hyperspace. The ships were unlike anything in the Council's databases. They stretched over a mile long with hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered their surfaces, and they moved with a predatory grace that made Amy's stomach clench with fear. "What are those?" her mother whispered, staring up at the alien vessels. Amy was about to answer when the first capture beams struck the settlement. The beams didn't destroy buildings or kill people. Instead, they reached down from the ships like giant hands made of energy, grabbing entire families and lifting them into the air. Amy watched in horror as her neighbors floated upward, struggling helplessly against the invisible force that held them. Colonel Brooks felt the defense station shake as unknown weapons struck its shields. Her screens filled with warning signals as energy readings went far beyond anything her sensors were designed to measure. "All stations report," she called over the communication system. "Unknown vessels have surrounded the planet," came the reply from the tactical station. 37 ships, configuration unknown. They're deploying some kind of capture technology on the surface. Lisa's training took over. "Activate all defensive systems. Send a distress signal to Earth and the nearest Council station. Prepare to engage the enemy vessels." But even as she gave the orders, Lisa knew they were outmatched. The defense station's weapons were designed to fight pirates, not an invasion fleet with technology decades ahead of anything humanity possessed. Down on the surface, Amy ran through the streets of the settlement, trying to reach her house. Everywhere she looked, the capture beams were lifting people into the air. Children cried for their parents as they floated upward, while adults reached desperately for family members being torn away from them. Dan Williams, the colony's head farmer, stood in the town square organizing the few people who had managed to avoid the beams. "Everyone get to the emergency shelters," he shouted. "Stay in groups and keep moving." But the shelters offered little protection against technology that could reach through solid walls. Amy watched as the beams passed through the roof of the community center, extracting the families who had taken refuge inside. The aliens weren't just taking random people. Amy realized with growing horror that they were being selective, targeting the youngest and strongest colonists while leaving the elderly and disabled behind. This wasn't a military attack. It was a harvest. Captain Jake Morrison and the crew of the UES Falcon arrived in the New Montana system just as the attack reached its peak. His ship's advanced sensors immediately detected the massive alien fleet, and his blood went cold as he realized what was happening. 37. Hostile vessels conducting population extraction operations, reported Lieutenant Chen. "They're taking the colonists alive. Slave raids," Jake said grimly. "Get me everything you can on those ships. I want to know who they are and where they came from." The Falcon's sensors worked furiously to analyze the alien vessels. The ships bore symbols that matched reports from the Galactic Rim, beyond the borders of Council space. The Drakthar hegemony, a ruthless empire that the Council preferred to ignore rather than confront. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Colonel Brooks on the defense station," Chen reported. "She's requesting immediate assistance." Jake knew his single ship couldn't fight an entire fleet, but he couldn't just watch while thousands of humans were captured. "Take us in. Maximum stealth. Maybe we can rescue some of the colonists." The Falcon slipped through the Drakthar formation, using its advanced cloaking technology to remain hidden. Jake watched the main screen as the alien ships continued their methodical harvest of the human population. Amy crouched in the grain silo where her father stored the winter seed, listening to the sounds of capture beams moving across the farm. She had made it back to the house just in time to see her parents lifted into the air, their faces filled with terror as they floated upward toward the waiting alien ship. Her father had shouted something to her just before the beam took him, but she couldn't make out the words over the sound of the alien engines. Now she was alone, hiding in the darkness while her entire world fell apart around her. Through a crack in the silo wall, Amy could see the alien ships loading their human cargo into specialized holding bays. The ships were equipped with thousands of individual cells, each one designed to hold a human being. This wasn't a random raid. The aliens had planned this operation carefully, studying human physiology and designing their ships specifically for capturing people. Colonel Brooks fired everything the defense station had at the nearest Drakthar ship, but her weapons barely scratched the alien vessel's shields. Return fire came almost casually, precise energy beams that systematically destroyed the station's weapon systems without killing the crew. They want us alive too, Lisa realized with growing dread. This whole thing is about taking prisoners. The Drakthar fleet finished its harvest operation with mechanical efficiency. In less than 3 hours, they had captured over 40,000 humans from New Montana and the surrounding settlements. The ships began moving back toward hyperspace, their holds full of human cargo destined for slave markets in the Galactic Rim. Jake Morrison managed to rescue Amy and 37 other survivors who had hidden successfully during the raid. His ship's small size allowed him to approach the planet's surface without detection. But there was nothing he could do about the massive fleet carrying away most of New Montana's population. As the Drakthar ships disappeared into hyperspace, Amy sat in the Falcon's passenger compartment, staring out at the empty settlements below. Her parents were gone, along with almost everyone she had ever known. The festival decorations still hung in the abandoned streets, mocking reminders of the celebration that would never happen. "Where are they taking them?" she asked Jake, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake's expression was grim. "Slave markets in the Outer Rim. The Drakthar have been raiding smaller species for centuries. The Council knows about it, but they don't consider it their problem. What about rescue operations? Surely someone will go after them." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "The Council doesn't conduct military operations outside their territory, and Earth's fleet isn't strong enough to challenge the Drakthar in open combat." Amy turned back to the window, watching her empty world spin slowly below. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, her parents and thousands of other humans were being carried away to a fate worse than death. And according to Jake, no one was coming to save them. But Amy didn't know about the message that Colonel Brooks had managed to send before the defense station was destroyed. She didn't know that news of the New Montana raid was already spreading through human space, carried by emergency beacons that would reach Earth in less than a week. Most importantly, she didn't know that humanity was about to be reminded of something it had almost forgotten during 3 centuries of peaceful coexistence with the galactic community. Sometimes, being civilized meant knowing when to stop being civilized. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched wider than most human cities. Elena Rodriguez walked across the polished floor, her boots making soft sounds that seemed tiny in the massive space. Above her head, the dome showed stars from 1,000 different worlds, each one representing a member species of the Council that had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Elena had been Earth's ambassador for 5 years now, but she still felt small in this place. The other delegates towered over her. Some floated in tanks of special gas. Others moved on legs that bent in ways human legs never could. The Korthani delegate looked like living crystal, his body catching light and throwing rainbows across the floor. The Zephyrian ambassador had wings that stretched 20 feet when she opened them fully. All of them were older than humanity's entire space program. Most of their species had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. They never let the humans forget this fact. Elena took her place at the small desk marked with Earth's symbol. The desk sat in the back corner, far from the important seats where the elder races conducted their business. 300 years ago, when humans first met alien life, they had begged for a place in this council. The aliens had agreed, but only after making it clear that humans were the youngest and least important members. The session began as it always did, with Elder Counselor Vexthal of the Korthani Empire calling for order. His crystal body rang like a bell when he moved. The Council recognizes the concerns brought by the Zephyrian delegation regarding military movements in Sector 7. The Zephyrian delegate, her name too complex for human tongues to speak, spread her wings slightly. Our deep space monitors have detected increased human naval activity near the border zones. We wish to know the purpose of these movements. Elena felt her stomach tighten. She knew exactly what ships they were talking about. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew aboard the UES Falcon had been conducting reconnaissance missions in the Outer Rim for months. But those missions were classified and Elena wasn't supposed to know about them. Elder Vexthal turned his crystalline head toward Elena. Ambassador Rodriguez, please explain your species' military activities. Elena stood up, feeling every eye in the Great Hall focus on her. The human fleet conducts routine patrols to protect our colony worlds. These are standard defensive operations, nothing more. Defensive operations, repeated the Trilaxian delegate, his three mouths speaking in harmony. Yet our sources indicate these ships venture far beyond human territory. Before Elena could respond, Elder Vexthal waved one of his crystal appendages dismissively. This concern is unnecessary. Humans are weak. Their ships are primitive, their weapons outdated. They pose no threat to any established power in this region. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the hall. Elena felt her face grow hot, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was how it always went. The elder races discussed humans as if they were children playing with toys. Their short lifespans make them incapable of true strategic thinking, continued Vexthal. A species that lives barely a century cannot understand the long-term consequences of galactic politics. They react with emotion rather than wisdom. The Aquarian delegate, speaking through a water-filled translation device, added his thoughts. Perhaps we should restrict human military movements to their home systems. For their own protection, of course. Elena's hands clenched into fists. With respect, Elder Counselor, humanity has been a peaceful member of this council for 3 centuries. We have followed every rule, respected every boundary, and contributed to galactic stability. Indeed, said Vexthal, his tone suggesting this was exactly the problem. You have been obedient. But obedience born from weakness is not the same as wisdom born from strength. Far from the council chambers, Captain Jake Morrison floated in the command center of the UES Falcon, watching his screens with growing concern. His ship was one of humanity's newest and most advanced vessels, but even he knew it would be considered primitive by the standards of the elder races. Jake had been monitoring strange signals from the Outer Rim for weeks. Ships with configurations he had never seen before were moving through space near human colonies. Their energy signatures didn't match any known council species, and they seemed to be conducting detailed scans of human settlements. Captain, called Lieutenant Amy Chen from the communications station, I'm picking up another group of unknown vessels. Same configuration as before, but this time they're much closer to New Montana. New Montana was one of humanity's most successful agricultural colonies. Over 50,000 people lived there, most of them families who had left Earth to build new lives among the stars. The planet produced enough food to supply 3 other human worlds. How close? Jake asked. Close enough to conduct detailed surface scans. They're mapping the colony sites, the defensive installations, even the civilian population centers. Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Military forces didn't conduct that kind of detailed scanning unless they were planning something. Any response from the colony's defense grid? Negative, sir. The unknown ships are staying just outside the detection range of New Montana's sensors. But we can see them because of our enhanced equipment. The Falcon carried some of humanity's most advanced sensor technology, developed in secret over the past decade. The Council didn't know about these improvements, and Jake was under strict orders to keep it that way. Set course for New Montana, Jake ordered. Best speed, but keep us hidden. I want to get a closer look at these ships. Back in the council chambers, the session was coming to an end. Elena had listened to 3 hours of discussion about trade routes, territorial disputes between species she had never heard of, and complaints about various minor infractions of galactic law. None of it involved humanity directly, but Elena was required to attend every session. As the delegates began to file out, Elder Vexthal approached Elena's desk. Up close, his crystal body was even more impressive, reflecting the light from the dome above in complex patterns. Ambassador Rodriguez, he said, his voice like the sound of wind chimes. A word of advice. Your species would be wise to focus on internal development rather than external exploration. The galaxy can be dangerous for those who venture beyond their capabilities. Elena looked up at the towering alien. What exactly are you suggesting, Elder Counselor? I suggest that humans remember their place. You are the newest and smallest member of this council. Your protection depends on following the rules established by your betters. Do not mistake our tolerance for weakness. And do not assume that your brief membership grants you the same privileges as species who have earned their positions through millennia of wisdom. With that, the crystal being turned and walked away, his footsteps ringing like bells on the polished floor. Elena watched him go, feeling a mixture of anger and unease. Something was happening in the outer rim, something that involved human colonies, and the council clearly had no intention of helping if trouble came. Elena activated her personal communicator and sent a coded message to Earth. It was time for humanity to start taking care of itself, because it was becoming clear that no one else would.